It's a trade-off. It's a compromise between us wanting the commercial benefit that these big cruise ships bring and the environmental trade-off, which, according to the commissioners in this case, can be mitigated. But I think it's also a warning to politicians about making promises that you actually can't keep.
Do you agree with it or not? Do you think we should be building this extension?
Oh, I think we need to allow for the cruise ships, because if we don't put them in here, they'll just go to Tauranga.
Gomez?
I agree. I think we always complain that Auckland isn't a big enough city, it's not commercial enough, it's not touristy enough, etc. Well, this is one way to do it.
4 minutes to the hour, and to wrap us up today on the panel, the issue of CEO pay packets is in the news of the US, specifically now the extraordinary gap between the average person and some CEOs. Bob Iger, his nickname is Neutron Bob, laid off a few people early in his reign. He's the CEO of Walt Disney & Co. He earned a bonus that brought his total package up to $98 million a year, New Zealand. Now, the granddaughter of Walt Disney co-founder Roy Disney, Abigail, called on the company to give its employees a raise, spread the love around a little, describing his pay as insane. $98 million as an annual package. Can you earn too much, Michelle?
I think you can. It's hard to imagine how you could possibly spend $98 million in 1 year. Having said that, he probably loses half of it in taxes. What's interesting to me is the extent to which some very wealthy people are philanthropic and some aren't. And it's really interesting because I've seen a lot of that activity over my years in the philanthropic space. I've worked with a lot of charities, and people are either generous or they're mean. And I don't have a problem with somebody who's made hundreds of millions and uses that money to help people for good causes. It's at their discretion. Okay, they might choose, but hey, they've earned it. It's their right. And it's hard to imagine anyone earning that sort of money and not wanting to use it to do good in their community.
Golnaz, we've got a minimum wage. Do we need a maximum wage?
I think we need a living wage.
But what about capping salaries for these big earners?
I think it depends. It can't really dictate to a private entity that they should cap salaries. It just depends if it was a listed company or if it's a government agency or a government body. But I like what Walt Disney's granddaughter said in terms of spreading that more equitably within the company. So imagine if you were an employee within Walt Disney, your CEO earned that much, and you're earning a very, very basic wage salary. It would be hard to stay motivated. So I think the point is how to make everybody in the organisation feel valued.
But some employers do that. I remember being in a restaurant in Mexico where people worked so hard. It's a place on the beach at Cabo called The Office, and these waiters ran everywhere in the sand, and everybody said, why do they work so hard? And you know why? Because for a month every year, the owner shut the restaurant and took all the employees overseas for a holiday.
I want a boss like that.
Now, she was spreading the love and the profit she made, right? And that's why they wanted to work
and
there.
they'll never want to leave.
Exactly.
Michelle Bow, Golnaz Bassam Tabar, thanks for joining us on the panel today. Happy birthday to Barbara Streisand. She's 77. This has been the panel on RNZ National. Hope you've enjoyed our show.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, are the mass bombings in Sri Lanka retaliation for the Christchurch mosque massacres? Its president foreshadows sweeping changes to both the police and security services after they failed to prevent the attacks despite apparent warnings. A team of Kiwi schoolboy cricket players on tour in Sri Lanka is finally heading home overnight. Jacinda Ardern joins forces with the French president in a bid to eradicate violent extremist content online. Is that even possible? How much is too much to pay to park outside your own house? Residents want Wellington City Council to put planned price hikes in reverse. This is Checkpoint. Check us out on Facebook Live.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. Junior doctors have rejected a call by their employers to withdraw planned strike action next week. It comes as dates are finally agreed for urgent facilitation in the row with district health boards. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
DHBs this afternoon called on the resident medical officers, or RMOs, to withdraw a 5-day strike beginning early next Monday. They say facilitation by the Employment Relations Authority will take place on May 9th, 10th, 13th and 14th, with written submissions due from both sides on May the 3rd. The DHBs urged the doctors to reconsider, saying there is nothing to be gained by a strike. They added that the next strike, being longer than the 4 earlier 2-day strikes, will have more impact on hospitals. But the Doctors' Union, the Resident Doctors Association, has rejected that call, saying that the strike at all DHBs except Canterbury will proceed as planned. Ko Karen Brown, DNA.
A woman is fighting for an apology from Auckland Council after her elderly partner died when he fell into a hole on a busy footpath. Pat Davidson's 88-year-old partner, Bruce Steedman, fell and cracked his head on a sharp edge of a tree pit in Newmarket and died 10 days later. Local businesses had for years warned the council there would be an accident resulting from the open holes on the footpath. Auckland Council says it's saddened to hear what happened and that it tried to contact Ms Davidson but it couldn't get in touch with her. It says the incident is subject to a coronial inquiry and they can't say anything else. Ms Davidson is furious and will keep fighting.
I suppose that the council really do admit that they were at fault. That's what I really want. I've made a promise to myself that I'm not going to give up and I'm just going to follow it through right to the end. And that's that. I shall.
Pat Davidson. The death toll from the Easter suicide bombing attacks on churches and hotels in Sri Lanka has climbed to 359. The police released the new toll, but did not give a breakdown of casualties from the 3 churches and 4 hotels hit by suicide bombers. The attacks have been claimed by the Islamic State militant group, which says they were carried out by 7 attackers. World leaders and tech companies will be urged to work together to try to end the use of social media for terrorist acts at a meeting in Paris next month. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is teaming up with French President Emmanuel Macron for the meeting, which will ask leaders and CEOs to sign a pledge to eliminate extremist content. Here's our political reporter, Yvette McCullough.
Ms Ardern says she's already spoken to Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft and Google and has had positive responses. She says they're starting from a place of unity because no internet company wants their platform to be used for violent extremism. However, there's scepticism over whether these US tech giants will cooperate, given their tendency to be driven by free speech. National leader Simon Bridges is also questioning whether this global conversation will translate into anything meaningful and is warning of potential erosion of freedoms. From Parliament, Yvette McCullough.
Veterans and their families are set to receive an extra $4 million over 4 years to support their well-being. The Veterans Minister Ron Mark says the money will go towards health and well-being assessments to make sure people have continuing support after leaving the Defence Force. He also promises that veterans will be contacted soon after leaving the Defence Force and connected with a health provider or support service if they need it. Mr Mark says veterans are proud people and often do not turn to Veterans Affairs until it's too late. He says early interventions are crucial and the funding boost will ensure veterans and their families receive the support they need. Some residents in Wellington's central suburbs are urging the City Council to hold off on a planned parking fee hike. The council is proposing to increase residents and coupon parking by more than 50% each, taking them to $195 and $120 a year, respectively. A student at Victoria University, Izzy Vicconi, says Wellington's already an incredibly expensive place to live. Her rent is $200 for a room, and this will make it harder for her to make ends meet.
I already pay $130 to park outside my house, and half the time I'm not even guaranteed to park. I'll come home, there's no parks. So I guess I just don't see the need for an increase when half the time I don't actually get what I'm paying for.
Izzy Vicconi says she needs a car for work as the public transport system is not reliable. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 5. The Northern Mystics are eyeing second spot on the ANZ Netball Premiership ladder when they play the Southern Steel in Dunedin tonight. Combinations are finally clicking for the Auckland-based side, particularly in the shooting circle, with teenager Grace Mweke in top form. Coach Helene Wilson says it's taken longer than anticipated, but her side have finally found some form.
While we didn't have success at the start of the season, we were a really new group coming together. So they were still committed to what we were trying to achieve, and finally that did click. The growth is really motivating. You know, when you grow and you play better each week, it's a motivating way to keep working hard.
Helene Wilson. The Highlanders fullback Ben Smith will sit out the second of his All Black stand-down games against the Sunwolves in Tokyo on Friday. Back in the starting lineup are All Blacks Aaron Smith and Luke Whitelock, who both came off the bench in the win against the Blues last round. Whitelock has been named at blindside flanker, with Elliot Dixon staying at number 8. The British boxing star Anthony Joshua is confident he will have an opponent confirmed by the end of the week for the looming defence of his heavyweight titles at Madison Square Garden. The WBO, WBA and IBF champion was scheduled to fight Jarrell Miller on June the 1st until the undefeated American tested positive for banned substances. That's the news.
This Anzac Day, we're looking at the legacies of war and peace around the world and in Aotearoa. In 1919, world leaders tried to end all war at the Great Paris Peace Conference. Sadly, that didn't work, but historian Margaret McMillan wonders, is it time to try again 100 years on? We'll also be looking at the lives of New Zealanders affected by conflict during the New Zealand Wars and throughout the 20th century. Join me, Colin Peacock, on Anzac Day morning from 8 till midday, here on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. In the west, from Northland to North Taranaki, cloudy periods, isolated showers in Northland. Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, central high country. Scattered showers in Bay of Plenty spreading to Coromandel this evening and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon. For South Taranaki through to Wellington, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle in the mornings and evenings, however fine in Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast today. Gisborne through to Wairarapa, occasional rain, heavy and possibly thundery north of Gisborne today, clearing everywhere tomorrow night. For Marlborough, Nelson and Bulla, mainly fine, areas of cloud this evening and tomorrow morning, a few showers in Bulla tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods, a few showers spreading north from tonight, rain later tomorrow, briefly heavy. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, areas of low cloud and drizzle, clearing tomorrow morning, but scattered rain for Otago and Southland later in the day. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few showers tomorrow. It's 5:07. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Sri Lanka's president has announced he'll completely restructure the police and security forces in coming days and weeks after their failure to prevent the Easter Sunday bombings that killed nearly 360 people. It's believed authorities were given multiple warnings about a planned terror attack but took no action, and the president says the information wasn't shared with him. Although Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the murders, and a junior minister has suggested it was in retaliation for the Christchurch attacks. The Sri Lankan government maintains homegrown terror groups were responsible. The ABC's Sabra Lane reports.
As the open caskets are sealed, there is unrestrained grief. Monique Suriarachi and her 10-year-old daughter Alexandria were killed in one of several suicide bomb blasts that shattered the peace of Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday morning. They died inside a Negombo church, one of several targets attacked by Islamist extremists. Along with husband Sudesh Cologne, who survived, they were among the many families packed into the Catholic House of Prayer for Mass. The family had lived in Australia for nearly 20 years before returning home to be closer to family. Now they're a family ripped apart. A national day of mourning was marked by mass burials close to the 3 churches that were bombed. Parents buried children, children buried parents. Whole families were buried together. Sri Lanka is a nation in shock. Authorities have revealed that 2 homegrown terror groups were behind the savage attacks, but the planning and execution were so sophisticated that attention quickly turned to foreign groups that may have assisted in the deadly plot. As victims were buried, the Islamic State group released a statement claiming responsibility for the attacks, but its propaganda channels didn't substantiate the claim with evidence. IS said the bombings were in retaliation for the Christchurch mosque massacre in March, which saw 50 people killed as they prayed. But some security analysts say the plot bore the hallmarks of an attack that had been planned long before that date. In Colombo, the house police raided in connection with the violence is covered in debris from the explosives its occupants detonated when they were cornered. This neighbour describes the moment police burst in and 2 explosions rocked the suburb.
Actually, I was asleep, and then according to my sister and my mother, my dad came rushing in and said that the STF Special Task Force were rushing into the house. So then my mother and sister were worrying because my dad said he wanted to go out and see what's wrong. So then I woke up for the sound of that. When I was coming to the door, the explosion happened.
The man is too scared to reveal his name, but he says he was stunned to learn his neighbours were suspects in one of the deadliest terror attacks the world has seen in the last decade.
I was actually shocked. Like, I never expected this family to happen here.
Sabra Lane reporting. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has denied suggestions that the Sri Lankan terror attacks are linked to the deadly shootings in Christchurch. She says at this stage there is no evidence to suggest the 2 events are linked.
Look, I have seen reports of those statements. We haven't received anything officially, nor have we received any intelligence reports that corroborate what has been said in Sri Lanka. Look, I absolutely understand though. Sri Lanka will be in the very early stages of its investigations, and so we're simply stepping back and allowing them to undertake those. But again, as I say, we have nothing to, at this stage, corroborate what is being said.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. A New Zealand schoolboy cricket team is heading home from Sri Lanka overnight after essentially being in lockdown when part of their tour was cancelled due to the Easter Sunday terrorist attacks. The team of teenagers is made up of 11 players from about 9 schools, plus 4 staff are with them. They have been in Gull, south of the capital Colombo. They were sponsored on the trip by Dilmah Tea founder Miral Fernando, who considers New Zealand his second home. Mr Fernando gives away 10% of his income because he believes less poverty means less conflict. I spoke to him from his home in Colombo a short time ago, and I started by asking him how the cricket team is.
They are in Gaul, and Gaul was not affected by this terror, and they are hale and hearty. We are in constant touch with them, and we had to cancel 2 of their matches. Otherwise, they are fine, and they are returning to New Zealand, I think, tonight.
So they are school-age young men.
Yes.
How has it been for them, and where have they been staying during this time?
Well, during the sad incidents, they were all in Gaul, and their Gaul is, say, about 85 miles away from where this happened. So they are unaware of what has, except what they have seen on TV.
So you are a Christian man, and one of the churches that was attacked is in your hometown. This must feel really personal for you.
Yes, it is.
Tell me about that. I'm so sorry.
They attacked the churches in Negombo district. Negombo is called the Little Rome because of all Christians. And that church, there were about 23 people dead there. And the other they attacked in Colombo was a shrine with all religions worshipped there. And that was destroyed with so many human lives gone. You know, Lisa, when terror strikes Sri Lanka, New Zealand or Australia, it strikes the whole world. So the number of people from all over the world who have expressed their concern and sympathies to me, including those I had not been in contact for the last 20 and 25 years, has really, really warmed my heart up to see that terror is something that strikes the hearts of everyone around the world. So if it is of any comfort, our misery, our sad is shared by some around the world. I don't have to remind you, you had an unfortunate incident recently, so you must know what terror is. Whether it comes in the name of religion, race, or whatever, terror hits the whole world.
Did you know that church well, the Ngombo Church?
Yes, Katuapitiya Nigambo Church. Yes, it is 4 miles away from where I was born. I knew that church very well, and I used to go and worship now and then when I go to my village, and that is destroyed now. And the one in Kuchikade, St. Anthony's Kuchikade, is a miraculous place where, as I said, people of all religions go. And it's in pieces now. I have not seen it yet, but it's in pieces because we are now confined to our homes. We are not moving around for the moment.
So yes, what is it like there? You have been away on a trip, you've come home recently. Does it feel different? What is it like?
The country has come to a complete standstill. Everybody is in tears. They are sad for the tourists, the visitors who came to visit our beautiful country, blessed by nature in abundance, and the warm-hearted people, very much like Kiwis, and now we have had to send some of them back to their homes in coffins. That shock will never leave me for the rest of my life. And I'm sure that is a feeling of so many of my friends. And I must mention that every member of my family, my relatives, and every single employee of the company and their families were untouched. We have absolute faith in God who guides us, protects us in everything we do. And here is an example where divine guidance and protection has truly protected us.
I know you've spent much of your life heavily involved in philanthropy and projects that are raising people up out of poverty and a number of initiatives. I'm wondering, have you started to mull over what's happened in your country? And do you have ideas about what you might need, what you can do?
Yes, the philanthropy and the charity I do comes from my heart. We don't talk about it, but every one of my companies in the group has to contribute 10% of its profits before tax to the NGF Charitable Foundation. And my personal income, most of it goes to that, in the hope and the belief that people realize that wealth is not a sin. In most countries, wealth is frowned upon because the wealthy people trample the poor. Here, as far as possible, I try to set an example to the poor to say that wealth is not a bad thing because this man and this family shares some of it with us. So I do so in the name of all the wealthy people in my country, whether they follow or not. But it gives my heart a feeling of comfort so that I feel I am doing as much as I can for my country so that when my last call comes, I can say I did my best to leave this world a better place. I hope and pray that many other business people can do the same. If they do that, please, that there will be no poverty in the country. There will be no conflicts. There will be no terrorism. If we learn to share our success in business with the poor and the wider community, most of these acts will slowly begin to disappear because the poor will feel we are now finally seeing light at the end of the tunnel. That's my vision. That's my hope.
That's Dilmah Tea founder Miral Fernando, who was speaking to me via Skype from Colombo. New Zealand and France are banding together to try to put an end to the use of social media for acts of terrorism. Next month, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and French President Emmanuel Macron will meet with world leaders and tech companies in Paris to seek a commitment to eradicate violent extremist content online. However, there is scepticism over how effective this call to action will be and whether it should be the Prime Minister's focus. Here's our political reporter, Yvette McCullough.
The Christchurch call is a global call to action, a pledge to work collaboratively to stop social media ever again being used as a terrorist tool for rallying, organising or broadcasting acts of extreme violence.
I don't think anyone would argue that the terrorists on the 15th of March had a right to live stream the murder of 50 people. And that is what this call is very specifically focused on.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the way social media was used in the Christchurch terror attack was unprecedented, and New Zealand has a responsibility to push for change. While the details are still being worked out, Ms Ardern says the Christchurch call will set specific expectations for governments and internet companies. Ms Ardern says she's already spoken to a range of tech CEOs, including the heads of Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft and Google.
The response that we've received so far has been really positive. No tech company, just like no government, wishes to see violent extremism and terrorism online. And so we have a starting point that is one of unity.
But there's scepticism about whether global tech giants will sign the pledge and how much weight it will carry if they do. Technology correspondent Bill Bennett says the only feasible approach is a voluntary one, because online companies have a culture of resisting regulation.
The tech companies which are concerned are actually American companies, and they tend to think in terms of the First Amendment rights, and they don't see themselves as being responsible for the content that's published on their sites anyway. They see themselves as being some kind of neutral thing.
Bill Bennett says the pledge will need to have the United States backing to have any impact. National leader Simon Bridges is also unconvinced this global conversation will translate into anything meaningful. He says if the tech giants are true to form, their cooperation won't be forthcoming. And he's questioning whether Jacinda Ardern is playing to an international audience when her focus should be closer to home.
I think New Zealanders will say, hey, you know what, if you're not also progressing policies, plans and actions in New Zealand around our housing, our transport, our health, our education, why is this the big thing? Is it just a distraction tactic?
Simon Bridges is also warning that clamping down on the internet could risk eroding online freedom.
I think many are saying right now in Sri Lanka, the social media blackout there was wrong. It was an overreaction. I don't think it would be the sort of thing we would have wanted to see in the aftermath of our tragedy.
But Ms Ardern is adamant the target of this pledge isn't our online freedoms, it's terrorism. She says next month's meeting will be just the beginning, as she seeks to build as broad an alliance as possible to combat violence and extremism online. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
It is 23 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We'd love to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program so far. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know what's on your mind this evening. The survivors of a helicopter crash near Auckland Islands have begun returning home to Te Anau today. They will be interviewed in the coming days as part of a Transport Accident Investigation Commission investigation. Residents in the tourist town say they can't believe the three men survived their ordeal. Our reporter Tess Brunton is in Te Anau. Kia ora, Tess. What's the mood like in the town this evening?
Kia ora, Lisa. It is utter elation. I've spoken to quite a few business owners who've said it's basically a miracle, and that they lost hope when they heard that the helicopter had gone missing most of the news came out sort of on Tuesday. I mean, they described it as such a remote environment that they just didn't think that anyone would be able to survive. And it even got to the point where a group of friends and colleagues of the men met last night at the local pub to celebrate with a drink.
Yeah, I imagine it is a pretty tight-knit community there. So when they discovered that the news was, was the best news possible, I imagine that they were, as you say, beside themselves with elation.
Well, one business owner described tears just rolling down her face when she found out that that they were safe and well, because they weren't hoping for the best. It was looking pretty dire, but at the moment they're stoked.
So what else has been happening today?
So Lester Stevens and John Lambeth have been discharged from Southland Hospital, and we've received quite a few unconfirmed reports that the pilot, Andrew Hefford, may have also been released and on his way home to Tiano. There's been 2 investigators from the Transport Accident Investigation Commissioner, which has begun interviewing survivors, and also the aircraft operator Southern Lakes Helicopters, because at the moment we don't know what caused the helicopter to crash, which was then found about 3 kilometres off the shore. But it's been quite a tale of survival. I mean, they spent sort of more than 16 hours away in one of the remotest places that they can go, and so it's just been again a tale that people didn't expect, but they're calling it a miracle.
Thanks, Tess. That's our reporter Tess Brunton, who is in Tiano. Final preparations are underway ahead of the formal re-entry of Pike River mine next week. The bodies of 29 men are still inside the mine after it exploded in 2010. The Pike River Recovery Agency has been working for months planning the re-entry of the drift, a 2.3 kilometre tunnel that leads up to the mine workings. A ceremony marking the re-entry of the mine is expected to take place on Friday next week. Our South Island video journalist Logan Church spoke to the agency's Chief Operating Officer, Dingy Pattinson, outside the mine entrance today about what work is left to do ahead of the re-entry.
We're still reviewing all our plans and all our risk assessments and having discussions with WorkSafe on that over next week. And so the preparatory work we also have to do before we actually enter the mine is that for several days in cutting the concrete, because you've got to realise it is just about a metre thick concrete wall. So there's a few days work in that, so we're getting prepared to cut the holes for that. We know where the door is inside the wall, so we'll be cutting around that door, and we'll also be cutting a hole for our ventilation ducting to go through, because when we actually put people in through those doors, we've actually got to have the area ventilated inside as well. So all that's preparation work we're doing, getting organised to do beforehand. So come next Friday, what the people will see will be, when we do breach the 30-metre seal, will be 2 stages. There'll be one where the underground loader goes in and brings out the last of the concrete, that's of the wall, and the second stage will be when 3 people actually walk in, open up those doors and enter behind the 30-metre seal. You go back 8 years and we left a note to say we would return, and to me this is the first part of that journey really.
And meanwhile, 5 minutes down the road, the police are turning part of the old admin block into their base. They won't be sending any forensic staff into the mine at this stage, but about half a dozen staff will be processing any evidence that comes out. Detective Senior Sergeant Grant Collins took Logan for a tour.
Welcome to the Pike River Police Base. We're here at the amenities block, and this is a former administration building which has been provided to New Zealand Police for the duration of the Pike River recovery process. If we follow down the hall here, we have a briefing area. Probably of significance, 2 rooms here that we have. So we have 2 secure exhibit areas within the police base. One is a wet area which is used to dry exhibits which have come out of the drift and may need drying. This is the dry area room, which is secured and has lockable cabinets. So that allows the police to maintain a chain of custody for any items that come out of the drift. Any items that are identified that are significant in terms of evidence or that will be uplifted as an exhibit and brought out are recorded in situation or in situ. They're documented and their position is plotted before it's moved. Then the item goes into a sealed bag, into a box which is security tagged, and then at the completion of the shift, the box comes out in the tagged state and is handed over to police, who then formally take custody of that, who then open up the seals, inspect the contents, and then take custody of it. So it's a very regimented process that's been developed with the agency and police and other experts to maintain that chain of custody.
Detective Senior Sergeant Grant Collins speaking to our reporter Logan Church. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, parking fee hikes have motorists in Wellington hot under the collar. Plans are unveiled for Donald Trump's state visit to the UK. And is that cheap pedicure really worth it? Well, we'd love your feedback on any of that. Do text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you could always send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's Susanna Leotawa with the headlines.
Junior doctors are to go ahead with their planned strike action next week, despite a call from district health boards to call it off. The DHBs say dates have finally been agreed for urgent facilitation by the Employment Relations Authority to resolve the ongoing row. They have urged the doctors to reconsider, but the Resident Doctors Association says the 5-day strike will go ahead at all DHBs except Canterbury from early on Monday morning. The President of Sri Lanka has vowed to overhaul state security after Sunday's terror bombings, which killed 359 people. Yesterday, Maithripala Sirisena said warnings of an imminent attack were not shared with him, and he's promised stern action. Funerals are continuing across the country as people try to process the massacre of hundreds of people in churches and hotels, including at least 45 children. The suicide bombings have been claimed by Islamic State, which says they were carried out by 7 attackers. One person injured in the Christchurch mosque attacks remains in intensive care, and 9 others are still being treated in hospital. 5 people are in Christchurch Hospital, including one who remains in intensive care in a critical condition. 4 others in the city's Burwood Hospital, and a 5-year-old girl in Auckland Starship Hospital is still in a stable condition. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission is preparing to interview the survivors of a helicopter crash off Auckland Island on Monday night. 2 investigators have been on the ground in Te Anau today, where the crew are expected to return after being discharged from Southland Hospital in Invercargill. They will also interview the aircraft operator of the Southern Lakes helicopters. 23 new state houses have been officially opened on Auckland's North Shore. The Housing Minister Phil Twyford opened the development on Chippendale Crescent in Birkdale this afternoon. The project is part of Housing New Zealand's transformation of old housing stock, with the 23 new homes replacing 7 houses built in the 40s and 60s. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Let's get down to business with Nona Peltier, who's joined me in the studio. Nona, real estate figures. People in Auckland in particular love these figures, don't they? But maybe not these ones. The Real Estate Institute, latest Auckland house price data. What are they telling us?
It's quite mixed. And let's just talk about the pricey suburbs, because I think that's what people really want to gawk at, aren't they? So let's say Takapuna, for example. Their house prices have risen substantially, like a third, really 30% increase. That's a $300,000 average price increase. So they went from 1 million 6 months ago to 1.3 million to the 6 months ended March. 6 months. Yeah, that's the average price. Now, you might think, well, that's quite a lot. But now imagine if you lived in Herne Bay, which is considered one of the priciest neighborhoods in all of New Zealand. And its average price went from 2.1 million to just over 1.7 million. So that's a drop of $300,000. These are massive numbers, aren't they?
This is a whole house in some areas of New Zealand.
It's an average price only. That means that there's some more that are, more or less, right? And that was only a 17% drop. So there has been some significant drops. When you look at the actual base number, though, those are big numbers. 300,000 here or there. I suppose if you can afford a house like that, maybe it doesn't matter. I'm sure it probably does, though.
Yeah, I think
$300,000. It's a lot of money.
There'll be people squealing about that.
Yes.
And have they given any reasons for that
just these swings? Now, we've seen this happen, that, people who are trying to sell, will sell because they want to sell. But there's been a lot of information in the more national numbers that we get that people are simply not selling their homes. They're hanging on to them because they can't get the price they want. But if you have to sell, if you want to, sell your property, you've got no choice. You're going to sell, and those prices are definitely under pressure. Not everywhere, though. I mean, some parts of Auckland had, quite hefty gains, like 19%. 15% and so on, 10%. These are still pretty good hikes. But on the downside, we're still seeing like 31% drops. For example, Mount Albert, the price there dropped 31%. So that went from 1.12 million to an average price of 800,000. So if you're in that price range, there might be some bargains for you if you're looking.
Wow.
Yeah.
800,000. Okay, let's look now at a study by the fund manager Kiwi Wealth. Now, it's identified what they've called a lost generation who's missed out on a decade-long period of prosperity. I mean, who and what are we talking about
We're
here?
talking about young people primarily. So they did a survey of 2,000 adults, and they found that where the young people were concerned, more than half of them really are, they're just living paycheck to paycheck. And 2/3 of renters, same boat, as well as people in low-income families. They just can't see their way out of it. They just can't imagine that they'll ever have any chance at, say, owning a home. Certainly not these prices we just talked about. And yeah, they just feel like they've just missed out completely. The only savings that they have, potentially, if they're lucky and they can afford it through, say, their employer deducting at source, they might have a Kiwi Saver. But for the most part, they can't set any money aside for anything. And yeah, so the idea that they're going to own a home or something, it's not going to happen. And I spoke to one of the authors of the report at Kiwi Wealth, who produced the report that's not completed yet. It's going to come out next month. And he was saying, really, you need more than a Kiwi Saver. You're going to have to do something else to help these people save and to get out of the, really, it's a poverty trap, isn't it?
So I'm just curious, who did they consider this younger lost generation to be? What kind of age bracket?
Millennial.
So it was
millennials.
Yeah,
people who were born, that, the 20-ish life. Yeah, people that are starting out in life. And some of these people, of course, are also saddled with large student loans, too. So they've really been hit hard. And the idea of them ever being able to afford some of these even, reduced price homes, forget it.
And we say reduced in inverted commas.
Interestingly, the people in the regions were were finding it more difficult than people living in Auckland, which I thought was quite surprising.
It's incredibly curious.
It is a bit curious. I think it may be that people in Auckland make more money than people in the regions. It wasn't clear from a limited amount of information that came out. That report, which might have more information as it comes out, it would be next month, yeah.
Okay. So what about the market? How's it doing?
Really interesting. So it's been a pretty quiet week, as you can imagine, with school holidays, the Easter weekend, and now we're going to have Anzac Day tomorrow. So the markets have been closed, and but not today. Things went crazy in the afternoon, and that's mostly because the Australian CPI was far lower than the market had been anticipating. It was right off. Now, I wrote that down somewhere on all these papers I have in front of me here. But yeah, it was much lower than anticipated, and as a result of that, the Australian dollar dropped quite substantially, and since I think it was the lowest since the beginning of March, and took the Kiwi with it. Of course, that often happens. And really, for the Reserve Bank of Australia, it's almost certain that they're going to cut interest rates when the Reserve Bank meets there on May 7th. Now, we meet the following day, our Reserve Bank. So we were already anticipating, some economists were anticipating a rate cut here. We're in a better position, really, than Australia, because their interest rate, their cash rate is currently 1.5%. Ours is 1.75%. So that would take the RBA down to 1.25. If that happens, we'll see probably even more reaction. So the CPI was a big surprise. It rose just 0.2% on the quarter, 1.4%. For the year, and that is well short of even the most pessimistic outlook that economists had priced into the market. So, of course, we saw a big drop.
I was going to say dollars.
Absolutely. So we went to 66.3 US cents. but still holding strong against the Australian, not surprising, 94.1 cents, and against the pence at 51.2, which isn't too bad. But for the Australian, it went down to 70.36 against the Australian, against the American. Yeah, and that's just what I was looking at just recently. But it went down as far as 70.31, which is pretty low. That hasn't been seen since, again, early March. So, yeah, but on the flip side, well, the markets, the share market, right through the roof, because, of course, now interest rates are right off the table, so big boost to the other side of the market, right?
Interesting day in business. Thanks, Nona.
Oh, wait, don't you want me to tell you what the numbers were? The NZX Top 50 Index, it rose 0.2% to another record, 10,072.
So, over the 10 again.
Yep. At 67 points. And so, there's a lot to be said about that too. Some analysts are saying that's quite pricey. And at this point, anything's possible. Probably people will start taking profits when you look at the value of some of our companies.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Palcier with your business wrap. People living on the fringe of Wellington's CBD are urging the council to dial back a planned parking fee hike. The City Council's proposing to increase residence and coupon parking in inner city suburbs by more than 50% each, taking them to $195 and $120 a year respectively. Some residents say the increase will make them think twice about using their car. But as Michael Kropp reports, the council says that's the point.
Parking's at a premium in Wellington, even outside the CBD. In suburbs on the city's edge, houses sit cheek by jowl, built right up to the pavement. There are few garages, but plenty of cars. People have been paying $126.50 for a yearly permit, but now the council wants them to pay more. City Councillor Iona Pannett says it's a necessary step.
Instead of saying, look, we need more parking, we actually need to reclaim our streets for our children, for the environment.
There's a slew of increases planned across Wellington's parking spectrum. Residents, coupon and metered parking fees are all set to go up, with the increased revenue to be spent on road maintenance. Ms Pannett, who's pushing to make the city more sustainable, thinks the costs could go even higher.
What we've done is externalise the costs of private vehicle use to the environment. People haven't paid for the loss of amenity, the loss of safety, the pollution, the greenhouse gas emissions.
In Auckland, residents' parking costs $70 and in Christchurch it costs $54. But the councillor with the transport portfolio, Chris Freeman, says if parking fees hadn't gone up, rates would have.
It does look like quite a hike, but you are talking about a charge that equates to $3.75 a week or something like 53 cents a day. It's not a huge amount.
Despite the parking scheme, residents complain they can't park near their houses.
Parking in the streets just utterly diabolical.
The council says there are about 2,300 resident parking spaces, but it's issued more than 4,000 permits. Mr. Freeman hopes the fee increase acts as a disincentive.
Cars are proliferating on the streets and we've got to do something about it. And those residents who come home and haven't got a show of getting a car parked anywhere near their house to carry their shopping home, they welcome these parking charges.
Do they really welcome them though?
Because petrol prices going up as well as parking going up, I would obviously reconsider.
Half the time I'm not even guaranteed to park. I'll come home, there's no parks. So I guess I just don't see the need for an increase when half the time I don't actually get what I'm paying for.
It's not a huge increase, it's not because we have the benefits of parking on the street.
I'd be reluctant to pay that much more for the privilege of parking outside my own house, for which I pay quite high rates.
While some of these residents are complaining about the fee increase, it's still far cheaper than nearby metered parking. Here on the edge of the central city, for example, metered parking is $3 an hour, whereas just up the road, maybe 100 metres or so, the residents' parking area only costs a little bit more than that for a whole week. But for those who think that's too steep, the councillors suggest they get rid of their cars and rely on car sharing and public transport instead. For Checkpoint, call Michael Kropp there now.
I'm sure you have some views on that one, so do let us know what they are. Text on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. An Auckland widow is taking on the council after her 88-year-old partner died after falling into an uncovered, unfilled tree pit on a Newmarket footpath. Bruce Steedman had been discharged from Auckland Hospital in a taxi without his walking stick and hit his head as he fell. He died 10 days later. Jordan Bond reports.
Bruce Steedman would have celebrated his 89th birthday yesterday. He was a keen horticulturalist, an avid jazz lover, won marathons after taking up running in his 40s, and was a loving father and granddad. His full life was cut short last month. Mr. Steedman's widow and partner of 40 years, Pat Davidson, says she can't believe the council would leave large holes unfilled in the footpath, even long after local shop owners complained. She's fighting so an avoidable tragedy like this doesn't happen to anyone else.
I'm just furious that it happened, and the neglect. I mean, to think those shopkeepers have been complaining for so long, and it was an accident waiting to happen, So this is a legacy for Bruce.
Mr. Steedman went to Auckland Hospital with a pain in his jaw and was discharged on Monday the 4th of March and put in a taxi. The taxi dropped him off in the middle of Newmarket's busy shopping strip, Broadway, and without his walking stick, the 88-year-old tripped across the open hole, smashing his head into the sharp edge, prompting one shopkeeper to presume he was already dead. He was taken straight back to hospital in an ambulance and died in a hospice 10 days later. Ms. Davidson says Bruce had called her in the taxi to say he'd be home soon, but that was the last time she spoke to him.
I didn't take a lot of notice, really, because I thought I would be home. I did say to him, I'll put the kettle on or something. I thought he'd be home in about 15, 20 minutes, not far from Auckland Hospital to here, so.
Ms. Davidson doesn't know why Bruce got out of the taxi in Newmarket when they live in One Tree Hill, but suspects it was to have a look at the trees, which he was so fond of. The Newmarket Business Association has been complaining to Auckland Council for years that the holes are open and dangerous on such a busy shopping street. Days after Mr. Steedman's accident, they were all quickly filled with white pebbles, and now there's a permanent fill in place. The couple's daughter, Sarah, says it could have happened to anyone, including a child.
You can imagine it all over the news straight away. And just a joke that it took Dad cracking his head open for them to fill them in 5 days later, after 5 years of the poor old Business Association of Newmarket trying to get something done about them.
In a statement, Auckland Council says it's saddened to hear about Mr. Steedman and their thoughts are with his family. Its head of operational management and maintenance, Agnes McCormick, says the council tried to contact the family but was unable to. Pat Davidson says they couldn't have tried very hard.
I hate that. You should say you're sorry, but what are you doing about it? We've not even heard. I mean, they might say it in the paper. They've not said anything to us. We've had absolutely no contact. They know where we live. I've just paid the rates. So, it's easy enough to find me. They haven't even said sorry to us either.
The family is seeking legal advice and is considering its options. For now, Ms. Davidson just wants a proper apology from the council and an admission that they should have done better and won't let it happen again.
I suppose that the council really do admit that they were at fault. That's what I really want. I've made a promise to myself that I'm not going to give up and I'm just going to follow it through right to the end. And that's that. I shall.
I Tamaki Makaurau, mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jordan Bond, tēnei.
It's about 12 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know your thoughts on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Donald Trump will make a 3-day state visit to the UK from the 3rd to the 5th of June. The President and First Lady Melania Trump will be the guests of the Queen and attend a ceremony in Portsmouth to mark 75 years since the D-Day landings. He will also have official talks with Theresa May at Downing Street. The BBC's Johnny Diamond says the visit is also expected to spark widespread protests in London.
There will be gun salutes, there will be a state banquet, there will be a guard of honour. The full weight of British ceremonial will be brought out to greet Donald Trump for the state visit he was promised by Theresa May shortly after his inauguration. The last time he came for a working visit, there were enormous protests in British cities and a huge balloon portraying the president as a baby flew over Parliament Square. Asad Rehman, a spokesman for the Stop Trump coalition, promised that this time there would be hundreds of thousands on the streets.
We'll be planning a huge mobilisation of people. I think we'll be easily expecting way more than the 250,000 people who turned out last time. I think it'll be very visual, it'll be very creative, it will be a carnival atmosphere, but people will be seeking to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't have the photo opportunity that he wants.
The focus of those protests might have been the procession that most visitors traditionally take with the Queen down the Mall, the grand avenue leading to Buckingham Palace. But a source suggests that that may not happen this time around and that Mr Trump may follow the example of Barack Obama, who met the Queen inside Buckingham Palace. And it remains unclear as to whether Mr Trump will address Parliament, given the well-known objections of the Speaker of the Commons to the President's politics. A colourful but controversial visit awaits.
Johnny Diamond reporting. Teenage Swedish climate change activist Greta Thunberg has taken her climate message to the UK Houses of Parliament. The 16-year-old told a packed room of political leaders that her future and the futures of her fellow children had been sold for short-term profits. Greta is the face of a growing global youth-based movement sparked by her own climate strike outside Sweden's parliament last year. She told UK MPs their support for fossil fuels will no doubt be remembered in history as one of the greatest failures of humankind. The BBC's Nick Robertson has been speaking to her.
She may still only be a schoolgirl, but Greta Thunberg wants to teach politicians 3 or 4 times her age a lesson they'll never forget. Hanging on her every word in the Commons today, representatives of all the major parties.
We, the people in this Extinction Rebellion, and the children's school striking for the climate, we are the ones making a difference. It shouldn't be like that, but since no one else is doing anything, we will have to do so.
Greta's school holidays are a little different from those of most her age. She's travelled to Berlin to speak to a massive crowd, to Rome to meet the Pope, to Brussels, where she got a standing ovation at the European Parliament, before travelling, all by train of course, to London, to be hailed as a hero by protesters blockading the streets here. I asked her about the message she's repeated wherever she's gone, that it is now right to panic.
If your house is on fire and you want to keep your house from burning to the ground, then that does require some level of panic. You don't sit talking about insurance claims or rebuilding, renovations, then you do everything you can to put out the fire.
Greta was just 15 when she walked out of class and began the first ever school strike against climate change. Since then, more than 1 million pupils all over the world have followed suit. Today, politicians who rarely agree on anything agreed that they needed to listen to Greta Thunberg.
Nick Robertson reporting. An Auckland IT engineer is on a mission to help Pacifica kids find their inner geek. Ron Amosa has funded and set up a computer coding club in Avondale, aimed at sparking more interest amongst the Pacific community. The self-confessed computer nerd of Samoan, Tuvaluan and Chinese ancestry says he rarely sees other people like him in his tech job and he wants that to change. That and to one day see a lava-clad computer game character. Reporter Rowan Quinn and camerawoman Claire Easton Farrelly paid a visit to his coding club.
How about that one? Yeah. Try it. Chuck it there.
After school in Avondale and the laptops and brains are whirring at coding club.
It's going good, but this one's not working. It's supposed to be one touching whatever your ball's name is, but it's not here. I've named it, but it's not here.
Davies hit a snag in his program and he's getting a helping hand from Ron.
It makes like a game if you do them right, but if you don't do it right, it just ends up doing something weird.
He's one of a small group that are the first step in Ron Amosa's dream to get more Pacifica kids to consider a career in computing. All kids are welcome at Coding Club, but Ron hopes that for Pacifica kids, just seeing him in the role might help them see themselves in IT one day.
I know we're all built like rugby players. Well, not all of us, but, you know, it's like, oh, you should be doing sports or you should be doing music. Funny thing is I do sports and I do music, but I do IT as well because why not, you know? And I'm sure that not every island kid out there is just a sports jock or a creative muso. Like, I'm sure there's heaps of geek island kids out there like me as well. Like, I'm a computer geek. I love technology and I love just geeking out on stuff.
He set up Coding Club last year, buying 10 second-hand laptops himself, refitting them all for their new purpose and searching for a space. Rosebank School soon obliged, so he set up a classroom, bought bickies, and kids from many different backgrounds soon followed.
It's like a ballerina, and there are these drums, and you have to make the drum make some noise.
One of them, Dejan's, working on a dodgeball game and says Coding Club's taught her patience.
When it's annoying, you get really annoyed, like you feel like you don't want to do it again. And then when it happens and it works, you're just like, yes, I still want to do this.
And Emily's learnt perseverance too. She says having the IT professionals on hand has really helped her progress.
Just knew how to do a few things, maybe to make a sprite or a character. And now I'm just learning how to make it walk and stuff and talk.
Ben's grateful too.
You're taking their time out to do this.
Ron's mission is born from first-hand experience.
I've been working in IT for the better part of 2 decades now, and I don't see many, if any, like other islanders in my space, in the engineering space, in the systems administration space, where the kind of the bigger salaries are. Nobody.
A Pasifika business analyst, Mua Moore, is helping out today. She only works with one other Pacific IT professional and says she often asks herself why.
Could be a bit of systemic issues, inherent issues, the fact that some kids, maybe they're not in the environment that they grow up in, not surrounded by people within the IT space, so they're not aware that that is an opportunity for them. And maybe stereotypes as well in certain workplaces, they kind of pigeonhole you.
It's that opportunity that Ron wants to create. He says you can't say the best of the best are working in IT when there's a big proportion of people who have never had the chance. And as more and more jobs are lost from society to computers, Ron wants to see the Pacific community front and centre in the jobs that will replace them. And he's certainly inspiring the Coding Club kids like Ali.
What would you like to do when you grow up?
Kind of what Ron does. That's kind of what he does. That's what I mainly go for my goals.
This Coding Club, which has up to 10 kids attending, is step one for Ron, who's going to lease office space to try to expand on his mission. Davey says more kids should come and give it a try.
I could say it's fun and you get free snacks.
Ron's heard that message and has increased the weekly snack quota from 1 packet of biscuits to 3. Every session ends with a debrief and the bickies always get a mention.
What did you guys learn and what did you guys enjoy? Starting with Davey.
I learned how to write code and I enjoyed the snacks.
If I can expose these kids to just like IT and have a look at making games and websites and how electronics work and robotics, then if that plants a seed that grows something later on, then I guess this was a success, So that's the dream anyway.
And that was Rowan Quinn with that report. It will go up on our webpage and on our Facebook page, so do take a look at it. The kids are an absolute delight, and you can check out the free snacks as well. Let's get to some of your feedback now. We did an interview earlier with Del Mar Tea founder Miral Fernando, who is in Colombia, and we talked to him about the bomb attacks. And Kate has been in contact saying, thank you for having Mr. Fernando on. He is a wonderful man who has done many things, wonderful things for his people. I have seen it. What a sadness for him, as he is an active Christian. Thanks, Kate, for your feedback. On parking in Wellington, wow, talk about poking the tiger with that story. This is about the City Council's proposal to raise the cost of residents parking and coupon parking by more than 50%. Now, Martin says parking in Wellington for residents near the CBD is already outrageously cheap. Prices should go up even more than proposed. Renting a car park costs at least $50 a week, and the residents are griping about $3 a week. Cecily says, I'd be happy to pay more for residents parking, but currently unpermitted, unregistered neighbours and their friends park outside every day and have been doing so for years. The tickets go unpaid and so do the court fines. No more repercussions repercussions, according to Wellington City Council. So often no free space, though I pay for the permit, and that's an opinion that a few people have had. This one from Patrick in Te Aro. Patrick says, I support Wellington Council increasing parking fees. Cheap parking is a subsidy from all ratepayers to a few. This texter says, why should my rates go up to cover selfish car owners who demand to park on the street? Permits are a tiny fraction of the expense of running a car. Deal with it. I had a car for 10 years, got rid of it. Life has been great. Heaps of money for weekend road trips in a near new hired car. No breakdowns. Go carless. It actually works, says this person. And still more, Anna says, I live in central Mount Vic, where residents, including my family, commuters and restaurant goers, compete for parks. The cost increase is small. Car ownership and use needs to be reflected upon and discouraged, which this should help with. Just a shame that Greater Wellington Regional Council has just destroyed an excellent public transport system, says Anna. And this texter says, parking increases in Wellington, good move. It's time to break up with your cars, they say.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātawa tēnei. Junior doctors are refusing to reconsider a plan to strike for 5 days from next Monday. The Employment Relations Authority this afternoon set dates for urgent facilitation from May the 9th to May 14th. That led district health boards to urge the resident medical officers to reconsider strike action, but David Munro of the Resident Doctors Association says it's too late.
It's very much 11th hour. The notices are in place. The contingency planning is in place. And as we've said on many previous occasions, it's a settlement that will stop the ongoing strike action.
David Munro. All 3 survivors of Monday night's helicopter crash off the subantarctic Auckland Islands have now been discharged from hospital. The pilot, Andrew Hefford, was released from Southland Hospital in Invercargill this afternoon. Lester Stevens and John Lambeth were discharged earlier. 2 investigators from the Transport Accident Investigation Commission have been on the ground in Te Anau today. They have begun interviewing the 3 survivors, as well as the aircraft operator, Southern Lakes Helicopters. Southern Helicopters will also conduct its own investigation into the crash. New Zealand veterans and their families are set to receive an additional $4 million over 4 years to support their well-being. The Veterans Minister Ron Mark says the funding will go towards health and well-being assessments to ensure veterans have ongoing support after leaving the Defence Force. He also promises that veterans will be contacted soon after they leave the Defence Force and connected to a health provider or support service if they need it. Mr Mark says veterans are proud people and often do not turn to Veterans Affairs until it's too late.
They are proud, independent, resilient, self-reliant people. We need to make sure that we have an ambulance at the top of the cliff for veterans, not waiting at the bottom when it's too late.
Veterans Minister Ron Mark. An additional 23 new state houses have been officially opened on Auckland's North Shore. Housing and Urban Development Minister Phil Twyford opened the 23 home development on Chippendale Crescent in the suburb of Birkdale this afternoon. The project is part of Housing New Zealand's transformation of old housing stock, with the 23 homes replacing 7 houses built in the 40s and 60s. Phil Twyford says increasing the housing stock is critical.
We know that the single most important thing we can do to house homeless people and ease the terrible stress that the housing crisis has put on people at the bottom end of the rental market, the most important thing we can do is to build more public housing.
Phil Twyford says the government is on track to meet its target of 1,600 additional state houses by the end of the financial year. A woman is fighting for an apology from Auckland Council after her elderly partner died when he fell into a hole on a busy footpath. Pat Davidson's 88-year-old partner, Bruce Steedman, fell and cracked his head on a sharp edge of a tree pit in Newmarket and died 10 days later. Local businesses had for years warned the council there would be an accident resulting from the open holes on the footpath. The Auckland Council says it's saddened to hear what happened and that it tried to contact Ms Davidson but it couldn't get in touch with her. It says the incident is subject to a coronial inquiry and they can't say anything else. Ms Davidson is furious and will keep fighting until the council admits that it is at fault. Members of the Sri Lankan Tamil community have gathered in central Auckland to mark the Easter attacks. About 40 people congregated at Aotea Square to mourn the 359 victims of the bombings. One attendee, Nirusha George, says the last few days have been very difficult because of the Sri Lankan government's social media freeze.
Initially, we were able to talk to friends and family. At this stage, we're still not sure of who was involved, if people are still okay or safe or not. Personally, for us, we know our immediate family is safe, but still extended family and whatnot, we're unsure.
Nirusha George says the community is devastated that a decade of peace has ended in violence. And news just to hand, buses full of commuters in central Wellington are being stopped as police respond to an unknown threat made by a person on a bus. They say they are now seeking to establish the validity of that threat. One person injured in the Christchurch mosque terror attacks remains in intensive care. 9 others are also still being treated in hospital. The Canterbury District Health Board says 5 people are in Christchurch Hospital, including one who is still in intensive care in a critical condition. 4 others are at Burwood Hospital in Christchurch, which specialises in rehabilitation. A 5-year-old girl is in Auckland's Starship Hospital and she remains in a stable condition. It's coming up to 6:05. The NBA basketball season is over for New Zealander Steven Adams and his Oklahoma City Thunder side. The Thunder have lost Game 5 of their best-of-7 playoff series against the Portland Trailblazers, 118-115, to go down 4-1 in the opening round of the Western Conference playoffs. The Thunder blew a 15-point lead in the final quarter, with Portland's Damian Lillard hitting a stunning 37-foot three-pointer on the buzzer to snatch the win. Adams had 29 minutes on court, scoring 10 points and grabbing 4 rebounds. The Melbourne coach Craig Bellamy isn't expecting a repeat of last year's Anzac Day demolition job on the Warriors when the 2 NRL teams meet in Melbourne tomorrow night. The Storm thrashed the Warriors 50-10 in the same fixture last year, but Bellamy believes that result was an anomaly, and despite the inconsistent form of the Warriors this season, they'll still be a tough challenge. The Storm sit at the top of the competition with 5 wins from 6 games, while the Warriors have won just 2. Beating world number 1 and 5-time world champion Ronnie O'Sullivan has surprised many in the snooker world, but not the player himself, 23-year-old James Cahill. On his debut at the famous Crucible Theatre in Sheffield, Cahill enjoyed a 10 frames to 8 win over his idol. Cahill beat fellow Englishman Mark Selby earlier this year when he held the number 1 ranking and says he learnt to keep himself composed against top-flight opponents.
Just need to keep playing world number 1s, don't I? These players are under pressure to beat me. I understand that, but I believe I can beat anyone, and I've shown that now.
James Cahill. That's the news.
2 matinee idols in a week. Embarrassment of riches or cruel and unnatural punishment. You decide.
2 little men in a flying saucer flew down to Earth one day. Listened to a radio, saw a television show and said, let's fly away.
Matinee Idol with Phil O'Brien, Simon Morris and Alec Morris. Tomorrow, all afternoon on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. In the west, from Northland to North Taranaki, cloudy periods with isolated showers in Northland. Coromandel Bay of Plenty, central high country, scattered showers in Bay of Plenty, spreading to Coromandel this evening and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon. For South Taranaki to Wellington, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle in the mornings and evenings. However, fine weather in Horowhenua Kapiti Coast today. Gisborne to Wairarapa, occasional rain, heavy and possibly thundery north of Gisborne today, clearing everywhere by tomorrow night. Marlborough, Nelson and Bulla mainly fine, areas of cloud this evening and tomorrow morning. A few showers in Bulla tomorrow. For Westland and Fiordland, cloudy periods, a few showers spreading north from tonight. Rain later tomorrow, briefly heavy. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, areas of low cloud and drizzle, clearing tomorrow morning, but scattered rain for Otago and Southland later in the day. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few showers tomorrow. It's 6:08, you're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Reports that the Sri Lankan suicide bombings over Easter weekend were retaliation for the Christchurch mosque terror attacks were carried out by IS, being treated with caution by the New Zealand and Sri Lankan governments. Sri Lankan Junior Defence Minister Ruwan Wijewardene has said that the initial evidence showed the terror attacks on 3 churches and 4 hotels across the country, which have now killed 359 people, were in retaliation for the mosque shootings in Christchurch. But some observers doubt the Sri Lankan horror could have been concocted in the 6 weeks since the mosque attacks in Christchurch, so could not have been provoked by them. However, just a few minutes ago, the minister was back in front of the media talking about the possibility of links between the 2 attacks.
Is the intelligence suggesting that 1 week after the Christchurch shootings, this terror cell mobilised? It was that short a notice. There was 1 week past, they mobilised, and then 1 month later were ready to carry out these attacks?
Well, it's what we have found out is that there have been 2 safe houses, one in Negombo and one in Panadura, so it has been easy for them to plan out these attacks. So Sri Lanka is not a vast country, and I believe this group has been at some point thinking of making some kind of attack, but I believe, according to the agencies, that the Christchurch incident would have motivated them to carry it out on Easter Sunday.
The Prime Minister has said that there are no links and there's no intelligence reports that they have suggesting that the attacks are connected with Christchurch. So she's actually come out and rejected the claims made by Sri Lanka. Secondly, has India provided intelligence for yet another attack that is being planned here in Sri Lanka?
For the first question, I think, like I said, according to the assessment made by our intelligence services, this is what they believe, that it was motivated. As whether there was direct links, I don't believe there was a direct link in the sense there was anyone from New Zealand giving, financial, benefits or training or anything like that. But I think what happened in New Zealand motivated these people to carry it out on Easter Sunday.
Coming back to the IS factor, Minister, just like Christchurch, is there an assessment by the intelligence agencies that it is only a motivational or possible funding, or there is evidence to suggest that?
No, we are still conducting investigations on the possible international links. Right now, what I can safely say is with the IS is that it has been motivational, and we are checking whether there has been funding. As the training side as well, we are still making those investigations.
And that's the Sri Lanka Junior Defence Minister taking questions from the media in Colombo just a few minutes ago. Now, CNN's Nikhil Kumar is in Colombo and joins me now. Nikhil, what new information is emerging about the intelligence around these attacks?
Well, the information that is emerging both today and that's been coming out ever since these devastating bombings took place on Easter Sunday, the information has been very, very troubling. And I have to say, it has been angering people here, really, as they try and come to terms with this tragedy that's taken the lives of more than 350 people. We know that the Sri Lankan authorities had received specific warnings prior to the attacks. We know that now the Prime Minister, the President, and this was echoed by the Defence Minister, we know from them that they say that this information wasn't somehow relayed up the chain to them. And we know that certainly steps weren't taken to beef up security around the various targets that were ultimately hit on Easter Sunday. I'm standing, in fact, outside St. Anthony's Shrine in Colombo. One of the targets that was hit, there's a cordon around the church, and you can still see the inside of the church completely blown apart. It's an active crime scene. Just down the road from here, a couple of 100 meters, about 15-20 minutes ago, as we were out reporting, we encountered a wake for a man, a 60-year-old man, a father who was killed in the bombing. His 19-year-old son was down the aisle from him attending Easter services in that very church, and he had to lift his father's body up, who's still alive in the moments after the bombing, died on the way to the hospital. And people at that wake even as they mourn and they try to come to terms with the loss that they're suffering, there is palpable anger about how could this be allowed to happen if there was specific intelligence out there.
Nikhil, do we know anything more about the identities of the bombers?
We've had so far limited information. The presser by the Defence Minister, the State Defence Minister, just earlier today, in that we learned a little bit more. We know that one of the bombers, for example, was educated abroad. From what the minister said, they seem to be from relatively middle-class, well-off backgrounds. But we are still waiting for more specific information, both about what transpired on Sunday, exactly who was behind it. The minister didn't identify the leader. All of that, in addition to information about the suspects that they're still pursuing. We know from a press conference that the Prime Minister had in Colombo late last night, that the authorities are still looking for people out there who may be plotting further attacks. And we've had earlier, before that press conference, we had a warning from the U.S. State Department that terror groups could strike at any time. So it remains a very fluid situation with the investigation still unfolding. And so a very, very tragic, but at the same time a very tense situation here in Sri Lanka.
Have you seen or have they presented any solid evidence that this is actually the actions of Islamic State, and whether there has been any evidence that it's in any way connected to New Zealand?
Well, the authorities here are still investigating that. There was, of course, that claim made, but the authorities here are still investigating that. That's one of the strands that's being investigated as part of the various leads that are being pursued to piece together what happened, how it happened, the potential links to individuals or groups beyond Sri Lanka. So that's all being investigated as we speak, and we are just waiting for more information from the government as and when it's released.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. That's CNN's Nikhil Kumar, who is in Colombia. Meanwhile, one of the survivors of Sunday's deadly terror attacks is British-based American investment banker Matt Lindsay. He was with his children, Amelie and Daniel, who were among the more than 350 people killed in a string of explosions at churches and hotels. Matt Lindsay told CNN's Nick Patton-Walsh that his teenage children were at the buffet at Colombo's Shangri-La Hotel.
When the bomb went off, and it's hard to describe. It's like a wave of coming through. Of pressure. Pressure. It's hard to describe. My children were so nice. They had actually went down to the buffet before me and got the food for me and filled up my plate. And then I wanted a little bit more to drink. I was going to get it. My daughter said, "No, get it." And then the bomb went off, and they both were running toward me. And I'm not sure whether that's what killed them or not, but we started, and I knew there'd be another bomb because there always are these things. Another bomb went off, and
so your instinct was to get out as
soon as possible.
To move them with you.
Yeah, but maybe I should have just stayed and covered them with my body.
And it was the second blast near the elevator.
They both were unconscious. My daughter seemed to be moving. My son wasn't. A woman offered to take my daughter downstairs to the ambulance. I needed help moving my son. Someone helped me move him down the stairs, and they both ended up in the same hospital.
And you travelled with them to the hospital? Or?
I travelled with my son because my daughter went down before, and I travelled with my son to the hospital.
And do you recall in the hospital finding your daughter?
I mean, this is the worst part because I yelled for help. That's why I lost my voice for my son and trying to massage his heart, and the people were very helpful. The rudimentary facilities there, they did their best. I mean, a doctor there has been kindly, took me to the U.S. Embassy. I was there 8 hours. They got me out of the country, and they were very, very efficient and very kind.
Very different.
And I want that to be noted. That's really important. If anyone important at State Department is watching, whatever, please, the job done by your U.S. Embassy in Sri Lanka was fantastic.
And that was American investment banker Matt Lindsay. Funerals are continuing in Sri Lanka for the victims of the Easter bombings in churches and hotels. More than 24 people were killed at a church in the eastern city of Batticaloa. The blast rocked the Protestant Zion Church just before Easter Mass was due to start, and many of the city's residents have questioned why the attacker had targeted a small Protestant congregation while others targeted Roman Catholic churches. The BBC's Rajani Vaidyanathan reports.
In the town of Batticaloa, they're grieving. Around the town hang posters of those who died, smiling young faces of children killed in Sunday's blast. They'd been attending Sunday school, as they did every week. After class, they'd gone outside for snacks before the Easter service, a service they never got to attend. At least 25 people died in the blast here at Zion Church. 13 of the victims were children. Krishanti was one of the Sunday school teachers. Her husband Ramesh was at the church when he spotted a stranger carrying a backpack. He told my husband he was coming in to make a video inside the church, she told me. My husband told him he couldn't and took him outside. As I went into the church, the bomb exploded. Ramesh died in the blast. His actions saved many lives, but his 2 children, Rukshika and Niruban, now have to live theirs without a father. And for Krishanti, now a widow, the pain is all too familiar. Her parents were murdered in Sri Lanka's civil war. Her aunt died in the tsunami in 2004. Today was a day of mourning in this town. Black and white flags lined the streets in remembrance. This scenic stretch of the country's east coast has become accustomed to loss. Countless died in the country's civil war. The tsunami claimed thousands more. Now, it's trying to process this latest wave of terror.
And that report from the BBC. Turning to other news now, and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has arrived in Russia ahead of his planned summit with Vladimir Putin. Mr. Kim and Mr. Putin are set to meet for the first time in the eastern port city of Vladivostok, and that'll happen tomorrow, but they do not plan to sign any agreements or make a joint statement. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford reports.
On an island behind a tall fence, men wash down the steps of a sports hall. They're sprucing the place up for the first ever summit between their president and the leader of North Korea on Russia's far eastern coast. Kim Jong-un's armoured train will roll into Vladivostok station. Outside, the only North Korean journalists I spotted upped and ran when I tried asking them how this summit's being seen from their side. 17 years ago, Kim Jong-un's father was greeted at the same station here after the same train ride into Russia across the 2 countries' short, shared border. A slightly fresher-faced Vladimir Putin was in power then already, and the meeting was his attempt to renew an alliance that had faded after the Soviet collapse. Kim Jr., though, is only coming here after talks with the US over his nuclear program broke down, over Donald Trump's policy of maximum pressure on Pyongyang to abandon its weapons and tough sanctions. Moscow takes a different view, as Georgy Toleraya, a former diplomat to North Korea, explains.
Pressure doesn't change North Korean positions in nuclear issue a bit. There should be limit to pressure and some incentives as well. So, well, I think it's time to use some carrots as well as stick.
In the drizzle here on the central square in Vladivostok, there's a tour guide with a South Korean flag on a stick who's gathering together a huddle of tourists under their umbrellas. It's just another reminder of how much closer we are here in eastern Russia to Asia. And so the issue of a nuclear North Korea for Russia is something that's right on its doorstep. Local people say that does worry them.
Yeah, it's a bit unsettling. It does make me a bit uncomfortable, I guess, to think about it.
Do you think Russia can play a role in the talks with North Korea?
That would be great, but I'm not sure. Putin doesn't seem like the most peaceful guy.
Artyom Lukin is more optimistic. He's a professor of international relations at the Far Eastern University.
I don't think Putin would try to pour fuel into this fire. Putin wants Russia to be a constructive and responsible player. It's not in Russia's interests to see another crisis surging on the Korean peninsula.
For North Korea, these talks seem to be about showing the US it has allies and hoping Russia can help argue to ease what are crippling sanctions. No one here, though, thinks Moscow's about to break those sanctions. Its main aim seems to be inserting itself into the diplomacy, underlining its status and, as Georgi Toleraya argues, simply keeping North Korea talking.
As long as diplomats talk, the cannons are silenced. There's no missile launches, there are no nuclear tests.
And whilst it's unlikely Kim Jong-un will trust Vladimir Putin entirely, it is possible that after these talks, he'll distrust him less than others he's prepared to talk to about dismantling the nuclear arsenal that makes so many other countries so nervous.
Sarah Rainsford reporting there. A vandalism attack on Ngaruawahia's Cenotaph, which resulted in 2 bronze wreaths being stolen, won't be repaired in time for tomorrow's Anzac Day service. The Cenotaph is believed to have been damaged sometime on Tuesday morning, and the police are still on the hunt for those responsible. Megan May from the Waikato District Council told our reporter Liu Chen that it will take weeks to repair.
We got notified yesterday morning that the damage had been done. So we're presuming that it happened either overnight, the night before, or early hours of yesterday morning. There's approximately a 2 metre long length of marble that runs up the centre of the Cenotaph, and that's been damaged. A plaque has been removed or pulled off, and also 2 bronze wreaths have been stolen.
What do you think about this when you found this out?
I was really disappointed that it has happened. It's potentially somebody within the community who's done this, so it's really disheartening that that's happened, particularly at this time of the year with Anzac Day tomorrow and services planned to be held there.
Has this kind of thing happened before?
Not of this serious nature. We have had vandalism and graffiti around our district, but no attacks on anything as important as the Cenotaph.
So how long would it take for it to be repaired?
We're working hard at the moment, so we are going to get it repaired to a state ready for tomorrow. So the plaque will be reinstated and the actual memorial will be tidied up. It will take possibly 2 to 4 weeks before we can get the marble sourced, cut to size and reinstated. So that's a bit of a disappointment. We can't get it done before tomorrow.
And that was Megan May speaking to our reporter Liu Chen. How much are you willing to pay for a manicure or pedicure? $30, $50? What about your health? The Wellington City Council is the latest council to seek public feedback on introducing regulations for the nail and beauty industry. But those working in the industry say more needs to be done to protect the health of consumers. Charlie Drever reports.
Speaking to Wellingtonians with flawless nails and beautiful brows on Lambton Quay, some were more conscious of the risks of a cheap pedicure.
I usually just go for the cheap option. Well, that's because I'm a student, but I would also not go somewhere that was grossly cheap.
I've been to numerous who don't do a good enough job, and to the point where I now don't go to any nail salons to do my toenails. I know numerous people who have actually got issues with their toenails now from the amount of times I've gone to get their toenails done and have come out with fungus and issues. There are places where you can tell the hygiene's not as good, so you tend to stay away from those areas.
Last month, a regional public health survey of 27 salons in the Wellington region found 88% had woeful hygiene practices and therapists had a poor knowledge of disease and infection control. Wellington City Councillor Fleur Fitzsimons says the council wants to hear from the public and industry experts on what needs to change.
It's just quite alarming to hear that there's a clear lack of knowledge of infection control, of sterilisation, and we just want to take the first steps to address that. I just think that we all deserve to be confident that when we get a manicure or a pedicure, we know that we're safe and that it's hygienic. The council's really just taking steps to make this happen.
Senior podiatrist at Capital Sports Medicine, Katie Vodonovich, says they've started offering clinical grade grade pedicures due to people coming to them with infections. She warns the health impacts of a dodgy pedicure can turn sinister.
I guess the worst case scenario is in these people that have got, diabetes or poor circulation. The final risk, obviously, is that this infection is unable to be controlled and we lead to amputation.
That's a high price to pay for a pedicure, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah, and I think people don't realise that actually that could happen.
Hi, how are you? I'm Kathy. Nice to meet you. Now let me grab your coat and I'll hang that up for you.
Salon owner of Finishing Touch on Lambton Quay, Kathy Beswick, has been in the beauty industry for 30 years and says she's been pushing for regulation for much of that time. She constantly gets new customers who have experienced issues at other businesses.
People get terrible infections. It takes them a long time and antibiotics to fix. I see it every single day with someone coming in my salon with a problem, especially with feet, or people saying I went to a place a couple of years ago and I've only just got over the infection I got, and my toenails fell off, and it's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous what we're seeing.
Kathy Beswick says at many nail bars the staff teach each other how to do nails but don't have the knowledge to keep customers safe. Like podiatrist Katie Vodanovic, she wants national regulations and compulsory training for nail and beauty technicians.
Nothing's been done so far. I've even said to politicians when I've been doing their nails, what is it going to take for the regulation and the industry to be changed? Are you going to have to lose a limb before anything's done about it?
She says all her clients have individual nail files, which are kept in separate envelopes, and equipment is sterilised to a hospital grade. But that's a rarity in the profession. So buyers beware, if you don't pick a reputable salon, you could be taking home much more than a new set of nails. For Checkpoint, Charlie Drever.
I hope we haven't put you off your dinner with that one. On a more serious note, before we go, feedback on the story from Jordan Bond. This was about the 88-year-old man who died after falling into an uncovered tree pit on a Newmarket footpath. His partner is fighting for an apology. They say, I feel for Ms Davidson losing her partner in the fall. I'm afraid she'll get little sympathy or help. Last year, my partner tripped on a faulty maintenance cover on an Auckland footpath and smashed in her front teeth. After leading us up the garden path, council and chorus chopped us off at the knees. I urge her to seek legal advice. See you later in the week.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. One of Wellington's main streets is closed due to what the police say was a threat made on a bus. Willis Street is closed between Lambton Quay and Mercer Street. The police are at the scene trying to work out the validity of the threat. Junior doctors are adamant they will go ahead with their planned 5-day strike from Monday. All 3 helicopter crew who survived plunging into the sub-Antarctic Ocean off the Auckland Islands are now out of hospital. New Zealand veterans and their families are set to receive an additional $4 million over 4 years to support their well-being. An additional 23 new state houses have been officially opened on Auckland's North Shore. Housing and Urban Development Minister Phil Twyford opened the 23-home development on Chippendale Crescent in the suburb of Birkdale this